I'm Dennis Johnson from Melville House. I don't even know what phase of the lockdown we're in anymore here in New York City. My stoop is about as far as I'm willing to go from my apartment. But I do know my business is still closed, and so is a hell of a lot of the independent book business. So I'm still calling up colleagues and friends, trying to find out how they're doing and seeing if they have any ideas I can steal. Okay, I'm speaking to two of my favorite people in indie book world. One is Michael Reynolds, the editor-in-chief of Europa Editions. The other is Rick Simonson, who's the head buyer at Elliott Bay Book Company. You know, I think Seattle must have the greatest concentration of indie bookstores in the United States, of great indie bookstores. But Elliott Bay is justifiably maybe the most famous. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to see you. Great to see both of you looking healthy.
Thank you, Dennis. Good to see you too. Thank you for doing this. It's good to connect. Yeah.
Michael and I would have seen each other in India. That was our last.
Yeah, that was our last date.
Only a few months ago too. At that.
I know.
Those are the days, huh?
Yes.
Well, listen, Rick. How are you? How's everything at the store?
Store's fine. I mean, it's been for 2 months. It's been basically shut down. Although we've been doing online orders and been heartened by the response and support there. I mean, because it's not just orders, but the orders often have wonderful notes attached, and a lot of them have been in the form of gift cards or gift certificates, people wanting to support the store. And then, so that's been, and it's been, it's been a strange reality though, because all of us have had to adjust to those of us who are there, it's a very small staff, to doing internet orders, and many of the books were not even in the store. There was some of them would be shipped through the Ingram fulfillment part where the book's not in stock. We had to do that. And my own role switched radically to basically being on my feet all day doing the shipping. I was the shipping department. So I've not, my handling of books and being around books has mostly been holding them long enough to figure out what kind of a parcel they go into. And and my big thrill of the day is when I get a jigsaw puzzle and 3 books to fit in a container just so. That's been that. So, but now we've begun under the state, which has been quite kind of on it with various guidelines and things, to doing curbside. So that's begun, and with a whole new set of challenges, but also rewards. I mean, real people are walking up and wanting to come up and get books again.
Yeah.
It's still a little disembodied because you're handing them you're not handing them a book, you're handing them a parcel. Yeah. So it still doesn't feel quite the same, but we're grateful for the little steps that
how physically are you doing your curbside pickup, Rick? Do you have like a table?
Well, people they have to arrange. It's like they have to arrange their time for their pickup, and it's sort of set out there for them, and there's various cell phone calls and all that. But there's sightings of each other. I mean, there are masks and all that, and gloves. Yeah.
Well, so I want to get into more what you're doing to cope, but first, Michael, how is Europa? Europa's ownership is actually in Italy. So Rick is reporting from the first American epicenter. But you must have been aware of this really in a way a lot of us weren't early on.
We were, and I think we saw it coming, and we saw the measures that were either our colleagues were taking in Italy or were being imposed on them in Italy. Particularly, the main office in Italy is in Rome, and Rome actually has done quite well. It hasn't been terribly affected by the virus, but we have a small office also in northern Italy in Milan, and things were very grim up there for a long time.
Yes.
And in particular, my couple of colleagues up there were really feeling it, for a long time, and they were on a hard lockdown for 2 months, which was difficult, and seeing all kinds of dire scenarios sort of play out in front of them, and I think in a certain sense it's not maybe not the right way to put this, but we benefited from that because we took this very seriously very early. Yeah, before it seemed to me certainly that the administration was taking it seriously here in this country. I closed our office about 10 days, I think, before anybody else, at least in Midtown Manhattan, seemed to be closing offices. And also,
That would have been early March.
yeah, was, I think the last day in the office was 6th of March or something like that. And, you know, it was also, even though I had staff who were obviously dedicated, devoted to their job and were chomping at the bit to get back to the office, when we realized that we had certain logistical challenges to resolve and to meet, I was adamant that they not go back to the office. So, you know, we closed our office and didn't go back to it for about a month. And I think the other thing on a sort of more positive side that we experienced is, because it's not so much, not only the ownership that's in Italy, but we have colleagues that we work with on a daily basis in Italy. Our production manager is in Italy, our designer is in Italy, the contracts person is in Italy. Certain sort of functions that have to be done within any publishing house are actually executed for us in Italy. So we're very accustomed to this sort of remote working thing as well. And we transitioned to that, I think, quite smoothly and successfully, again, as a consequence of having this relationship with the Italian publishing house.
So now, though, are you doing more Zoom meetings instead of old-fashioned?
We definitely are. We're having daily Zoom meetings with the entire staff here in New York, and then usually every second day, sort of a breakout with single, managers of departments, and then maybe once every second week, we're also meeting via Zoom with our colleagues in Italy.
Right. I feel like my life has always been nothing but meetings, but something about Zoom seems it much more intense. Makes it somehow a little harder. Rick, walk me through. As I said, Seattle was really where this exploded first in the U.S. It was very severe there. Right. At what point did it dawn on you you were going to have to close the bookstore, and what unfolded?
The decisions on closing weren't mine. The owner, Peter Aaron, and the general manager, Tracy Taylor, were very central in those. I think, well, at first, the diagnosed cases were in one nursing home, primarily in a suburb of Seattle. And not that distanced it, but it wasn't like the whole city felt like it, but it was being felt right away in the way restaurant businesses was before everything closed, but suddenly things started getting quiet. Or I walked into a grocery store where there was this frenzy because people sensed something was coming, that it was like in Seattle, usually a forecast of a snowstorm. Just the forecast sets people off, and it had that kind of a feel to it. And but obviously it ended up being a lot more. So we do a lot of author programs, and that became the first manifestation, was watching that change, and our the scientists who had a major say in what happened here with the government people as part of it. Their first real statements were about gatherings of people, and that's what readings are, it's what sports events are, that's what bars and restaurants are. And that was what they really started narrowing down, from larger gatherings to smaller gatherings. So first of all, we had some big off-sites planned, and we were realizing those were probably not going to happen. And but it was all, again, it felt like that was happening to us before anyone else in the US. I mean, as it turned out, only a matter of 2 or 3 days sometimes, but having reality altered that way, so suddenly was jarring. But we started doing it, and I think the last night we had a reading was Jane Hirschfield read with a much smaller audience than she would have, and it was the night that the NBA stopped, and it was the night that Tom Hanks, I think, was diagnosed, and also when the local restaurant chains laid off all 800 staff, like they closed. So you realize this was really going to hit everything, and the store was closed. I mean, before it was felt the safety was becoming enough of an issue. It was probably 8 or 9 days before the state really put up the state's. It wasn't as severe as California's shelter in place. It was a stay-at-home directive. So, so we had about a week of phone orders, online, and we were doing some curbside that week. And then once the state put the more stringent policies in effect, we just went to online fulfillment. Some of that remote. I mean, people did some remote orders. So we just had a bare minimum of people in the store, all very distanced, because we do our store is pretty large, so it's easier to accomplish that than a lot of stores would be, to have 4 or 5 people in it.
So, and you're doing all of that out of the store?
No, some of it in. We were doing some fulfillment from in the store. It was a strange feeling being in the store, watching it sort of depleted.
Yeah.
Like and there was no books coming in. We put a stop. I mean, there was all the business end of putting stops on orders, canceling orders, trying to get terms extended from the get-go, knowing we were not going to be a place to pay for a while. And so that was also like some of the nuts and bolts at the beginning.
And when you say remote ordering, you're talking about doing fulfillment through Ingram or something like that?
Yeah. So there was some of that going on. There was a couple people that did that most of the time. But even some of the people in the store, I mean, people would order things, and there were things we didn't have. We weren't ordering them into the store in terms of that. So it was a mix of fulfilling in-house and doing the Ingram orders.
So how was that business? Was it decent?
Well, it was decent. I mean, we'd never obviously run that kind of scale of online orders, and again, it had a lot of people doing it as a gesture of support. I mean, they wanted books, but there was a lot of clearly extended support. I mean, there were comments back and forth with the orders placed, and you would see these things, some of them quite moving, of we want you guys here, it's so important, and all that, and a lot of moving emotional messages back and forth. We often replied in kind to their thanking them.
And I wonder how much of that business will stay with you in the future. I feel like one thing that's going on right now is that indie booksellers have really risen to the occasion and are working hard to get books to people and fulfill orders promptly. And they may even be taking some market share from Amazon, because Amazon just stopped shipping books for a while, you know?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you can order it from Elliott Bay and maybe get it 2 days later. It's basically Prime.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Well, yeah, I think there's some of that. I mean, I think we'll have to see, when we get to start moving to the next step or phase, or not knowing how that will go. But there's probably a mix of some people really want to be somewhere where there's other people again, that kind of human contact, and others more reticent. And we'll just have to see what that's all. But I do think we've learned a lot about this, and I know some stores who were not very set up for this really feel like they've learned some lessons. So yeah.
You had a great functional website already, which is just an advantage a lot of indies didn't have. Michael, what is it meant for you? What are you doing different now? What are your strategies to counter the whole new world?
I think in very general terms, the kind of publishing that we do, the kind of publishing that you do, Dennis, we, when it comes to the independent stores are not, a collection of cash registers for us. They're partners, they're retail partners, and we rely on the independent stores, certainly when it comes to to new books, to discovery, to new authors, to authors in translation, to authors that have a readership that needs to be brought to those books that need to be made. To not have that those stores there in the same way, to not have those partners there in the same way, driving demand towards our books, I feel that the biggest change for us is that we felt that we need to step up that function. You know, it's always been a part of what a publisher does to drive demand, a big part, a small part. But you know, that independent bookstore partner hasn't been there in quite the same way. And so
I should tell anybody watching this that Michael and I are both great travelers to bookstores. I don't really hold the candle to the amount of traveling you do, Michael, but this has always been a part of your MO for years now, just constant traveling and visiting of indie booksellers, as much to just promote the relationship as individual books.
Yeah, so, absolutely. So, you know, that I think has been the big change for us. We've needed to sort of step into that driving demand space a little bit differently or a little bit more. And we've spent a lot of energy, I think, doing that, certainly over the past month and a half. And I also feel that for us, the more difficult months are ahead of us because of the way that, you know, publishing works and returns and whatnot. We've been very active on trying to create a cushion in the meantime. You have to drive POS as much as possible, our sales as much as possible, so that we can build a little bit of a cushion for when, you know, for the months ahead.
Well, you've been very ambitious with the Ferrante screening after parties. Would you talk about that a little bit? That's
I mean, I think that's one of the things that we've been doing, and certainly is sort of a consumer-facing initiative more than a lot of the things that we would typically be doing.
Can you describe it for people that don't know what I'm talking about?
So it's, I mean, it came up very organically. You know, again, at the beginning of March, sort of what do we do now? We knew that we had the HBO series, the adaptation of Ferrante's books, coming up beginning March 16th, I think it was, and we thought, well, can we do anything around that? And somebody suggested a viewing party, and I said, what's that? And they said, well, we just sit around online with each other and watch the TV series. I thought, that sounds a bit silly. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, we've got to try something. And, you know, being maybe more of a traditionalist, I said, well, can we tack on a bit of chit chat before we sit down and silently watch this TV series together? And so we decided to do that, to have an hour of conversation before the episode. And at the first event that we did of this nature, we had 700 people RSVP for this thing. So, you know, clearly my staff were way ahead of the curve and way ahead of me. And it was a good idea, and you know, I don't think we even thought we were going to do any more of them, but it turned out to be such a success. And you know, there was very much a feeling that we were providing a space for people to come together and talk about something that they loved at a time when they couldn't come together physically. And we tried to do it in such a way that it was intimate and conversational and informal, and not a presentation and not this and the other. And actually the segment where, you know, after the chat was over and we would sit down together and watch TV on Zoom, but, you know, we were watching on our own TVs, but just still connected on Zoom. We had fewer people sticking around for that, but, you know, still a couple of hundred people. And it was incredibly moving, incredibly touching, sitting there in silence with your computer next to you and your friends on the screen as you watch something on TV. It was beautiful.
Well, you also had some real literary stars joining in on that, such as the translator of the books, and you know, lovely opportunity for people. Yeah,
it was great, and we decided to, you know, I think one of the, for me, there's no, you know, replacement for sort of being bodily and physically together with other people. But in this case, we were reaching out, or we were attracting a very international audience,
Right.
and that was something that cannot be replicated in person.
Yeah.
And so, in that regard, I felt that we were creating something that was unique and only possible with these means.
Well, Rick, this brings me to a question for you. So you can only do virtual events now.
Yes, right now. Yes.
And I think in some respects this is awful. In other respects, I think probably the big publishers at least are appreciating that they can tour authors more easily now. So it'll be interesting to see how these events work. How have they been working for you?
We have done a few, and actually, but I've usually let some other party take the lead technically, because there's a whole array of issues with that. And we, again, the way we got ourselves staffed, the people that would be most involved with this have been not so, we've done some social media, actually just trying to drive sales. That's the underlying thing, is to drive sales. And
Right.
the virtual events, there's gonna be some that you can do that. I'm not sure the way that, again, there's some authors where you have a big hall and sometimes do that bundled approach, which has become a way of a lot of the large, it's mostly the larger publishers doing that. How viable and how easily that will work in a virtual sense, I don't know. I think we'll probably look to do some of those, probably in partnership. I don't know where people's satiation level with being online will be. We're all a couple months into this, but if you start planning whole seasons ahead, between well-known people, debut, and again, you have all the capability of anywhere in the world, wherever in the world, both the authors, the audiences, but also how that accrues to individual stores, or and some of it's making more noise about the book, which at least drives sales, but it's going to be I think it's, we'll have to see how that goes, and where it goes. We're still trying to determine that, and I have a feeling down the road, though, before national tours come, this is sometime maybe this fall, maybe doing some local authors with live audiences again. I mean, there'll be, if the numbers are such, I mean, I don't think anyone could plan on people traveling, partly because state to state, but the feeling, some of the numbers in this state, because they generally have been good, and I get, there's a lot of other things that obtain, but I imagine it'll be like the 1980s when we started doing these, and we're sort of doing local people, and if someone happened to be coming through, but there may be that. But anyway, the virtual part, we'll be doing it, I'm sure, but I'm not sure I see how robust the sales will be with it all. And again, how much people want to, I mean, especially we're coming up on summer, and I think people probably try and step away from their screens a little bit and go outside.
Michael is doing both at once, as you can see.
Yes, I know.
He's gone outside, but he took his screen with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a good publisher. Well, it's an interesting phenomenon. We've been doing a lot of these events. We are hurriedly trying to teach our authors, the basics of being a television talking head, which is what this is, be frontlit, not backlit, stuff like that. Don't read for more than 5 minutes or whatever works. But because we see this is not exactly going away. We have had some great events, though, where a lot of an event is up to the author to get their people there if they're local. And when we have done them local like that, they've been pretty sensational, because it's easier for the author to get people to come if they don't actually have to come. And also, grandma can come from across the country. So that kind of made me think, well, maybe this isn't totally valueless, and maybe the future is going to be a mix.
No, I think it'll be a mix. I think we'll have both going ahead. I mean, we're learning, and we'll probably learn a lot more, just the way we've had to learn online bookselling in a way we never would have imagined,
Right.
In a way that will change how things are going forward. I think we'll probably learn a mix of things. Yeah.
It'd be interesting, I think, to see also how the platform developers react to this and what they come up with. I mean, essentially, we're adapting old tools for a new reality, even though they may be new to us, yeah, Zoom and Rooms and whatever they are. But there's got to be some bright spark out there who will come up with a platform specifically for authors or specifically for bookstores that makes all of this more interesting and more intimate and more physical and more fruitful for all of us.
And easier to buy the product.
And easier to buy the product.
There is one that is like Zoom, but is not Zoom, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it does allow you to have a buy button on the screen.
Yeah, there's, what is it called? Crowdcast, I think.
Yes.
We've looked into, yeah, that's not bad, but it still feels, I hope they're not listening, the Crowdcast.
I think everybody's listening on Zoom, actually.
It still does feel to me like a throwback to the infomercial. It doesn't feel like anything dynamic and new and interesting. And I you know, there's got to be, I don't have a head to even think of these things, but I'm sure that there's someone out there who's thinking about them.
Yes, part of our changing future. And speaking of our changing future, Michael, how have you adjusted your publishing program? I know you had to move your big title.
We did,
Fall, I think, which is the new Ferrante book, which everybody's really eager for.
So we made a few changes. I think on the question of Ferrante, you know, she has such a strong readership, a strong base at the moment, that our decision was really not based on whether or not we felt we could sell it under these circumstances. I think we could have published a bestseller tomorrow, yesterday. But again, you know, going back to this partnership that I feel we've always had with the independent channel, it's the independent channel that made this author's name, that made her reputation and her readership. And to have published now, when we're planning to publish, would have cut them out of the equation to a certain extent, to a certain degree. So it was really based on that, and you know, thinking about, well, when would be the right moment to publish this book so that those stores, that channel, is enfranchised and gets a piece of the action. So we did that, and I think we're going to end up publishing that book at a time that's going to be more difficult for it in a certain, because so much else is coming out.
Very proud.
But you know, I think it was the right thing to do for the reasons I just mentioned. We haven't honestly changed the program too much other than that. We felt that with the April titles, we had a very, very promising spring. It was going to be a big spring for us. We're struggling to meet our projection. We're actually doing okay if I look at year over year compared with last year. We're doing okay for now. But if I look at what our projections were for this spring, we're off. We felt that all of this started too late for us to change anything about the April titles, so we just pushed ahead with those. And some, I think, have suffered, and others have seemed to be going okay. We did clear out May a little bit, just thinking again about sort of our resources, our human resource, and wanting to give the team a bit of breathing room. And so we're not publishing much in May, and a couple of the titles we were going to publish mid or late May, we've pushed to June, and June to July. And we haven't changed too much about the fall. We've moved 1 or 2 books out again, thinking about the fact that Ferrante is coming up, and that takes a lot of energy.
Right. Rick, can you tell me what's selling at the
Besides
store?
a lot of the Ferrante backlist, I mean it's been an extraordinary time for backlist.
It's amazing. Absolutely.
For all kinds of books. I mean, the thick ones. I don't think either of you publishes the Cameron, but that's had a run like it hasn't had. But just that's been really interesting to watch who's taken on what, whether it's Moby Dick or the whole lot of Ferrantes. I think people, whether they know the new one's coming, it's just as many people have read Ferrante, it's like clear still more have been reading it. also, not just because of the two of you, but we've had been having a nice run on one of your books, Michael. I know Dennis, I think, just has or will have a panel of Iranian writers, but your Shokufeh Azar novel, The Enlightenment of the Green Gage Tree, which is an amazing book. It's gotten publicity press because it's one of the Booker international finalists, but that's a remarkable book. And she's in Australia, yes?
She lives in Australia now.
Yeah.
And
She's
we're
someone
trying to
else.
figure out if we can do something with her, for example.
Well, that's what I mean. That's someone I want to connect with about doing it based on that book.
But that's certainly been true for us, Rick. You know, it's so funny because in publishing, we pay so much lip service to the backlist all the time.
Yeah.
But we've also forget how important it is. And I think times like this, just for us at least, they illustrate just how fundamental. We wouldn't be afloat if it weren't for particularly sort of what I call the three graces of our backlist. Yeah, Jane Gardam and Muriel Barbary, The Elegance of the Hedgehog is doing well, and of course Ferrante. But it's so important. Yeah, it's really driving our everything at the moment.
And is Old Filth doing well?
Old Filter's doing well, yeah, and we noticed that and are working with it. Yeah, it's a great book, and I just think people maybe it's not entirely positive. Maybe there's a little bit of wanting the sure thing. So they're going back to books that they know are good, they've heard are good 100 times, but they get lured away by the next big thing.
And I think a lot of people's book groups often they get stymied by the big long books, and now they're having time for them.
Yes.
And Dennis, I just want to say, because it's a book I've been reading slowly and deliberately so, but it's a book that's been selling as a book you folks published, Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing, which has been a very apt book for now. My form of social media, or whatever you want to call it, during these times is when I was wrapping up the books was jotting notes down on people's parcels. Like I was wrapping them up, and I sometimes say, "Oh, you should also see so and so's book of poems or whatever." But I've mentioned that book to a few people, and it's been a balm to read. But also, she does so many things in that book, so it's a pleasure to be reading it and also selling it.
It's good book selling there, Rick. Good book selling. Yeah, you can't stop them. The good book selling.
Lessons of the master. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, it's strange how some books are suddenly freshly appropriate. That book a year old and still selling like it was new.
Yep.
It's really heartwarming. I mean, the national statistics are very interesting because everything kind of flipped, right? We've been struggling for years to sell fiction. That's been a harder sell than nonfiction. And we've been working really hard since we started the company to get our backlist as a bigger percentage of our sales. You know, you read about the glory days of publishing when backlist was 60% of the sales, yo-ho. And, we've never come close to that. And within the last couple of months, backlist is far outselling frontlist nationally, like significantly. Fiction is outselling nonfiction significantly. That's altering a little bit the last couple of weeks as all the YA sales kind of level off. But it's still, everything that we were getting used to and that was working has flipped. Audiobook sales are down. The thing that we thought was going to really keep lifting us up and was getting better year to year. So the marketplace just changed in so many ways. And it's I think the lesson is if you just do good publishing, it'll out in the long run for us anyway. And I think for Europa too. It's fabulous to think that there are more people finding Jane Gardam's Old Filth and that who could have thought there were more readers to find for Ferrante. Yeah. Well, the last thing I want to ask you guys, I've already gone over time, but it turns out you two are interesting. So the last thing I want to ask you both is if there's anything you're doing now that's new, that you're doing to cope with the coronavirus, that you may keep doing after this is all over. Knock wood, that's soon, I hope. I'll start with you, Rick.
Probably in the daily way, two things. I never even did this when I was a kid. I've been bringing my lunch to work, and it's like little carrots and little tomatoes kind of lunch, and sort of grazing, that kind of rabbit food. And the other thing, and I think Jenny Odell's had a hand in this, but since I'm not doing readings or whatever it is at night, I've been going for long walks, 2-hour walks, quiet, walking down the middle of the street walks. Spring, so it's lovely. The trees have come out, and so I hope to continue. I suppose for my health, I should keep bringing carrots and tomatoes to eat after this, and the walks I hope to continue too, because those have been a real boon to do those. Yeah.
Lifestyle improvements.
Yes.
Attaboy. Michael, what about you?
I'm going to go with lifestyle as well, Dennis. I habitually read myself to sleep. Yeah, that's how I go to sleep. And it's not the only time during the day that I read, obviously, but I read every night. And since all of this started, and the mornings have been a little calmer actually, because the kids are not racing around going to school and whatnot. I read as soon as I wake up as well, and it's fabulous. Yeah, it's a fabulous way to sort of bookend those sleeping hours, literally, right? So I'm going to try to keep doing that, even if I'm getting up a little bit earlier, 20 minutes in the morning before I get out of bed. Reading has been really terrific. And it sort of sets the day off, instead of checking email or rushing to make coffee or whatever it is. It's been great. I've always been a big walker, Rick, so I've been taking long walks. Another thing that I have been doing, however, that I intend to continue, if I don't have to be on camera for all of these virtual meetings, I've been using my walks to also do meetings. So whenever I have a meeting, I go out for a walk, which is kind of great.
Yeah. Great.
Wow. Now, if you could only figure out how to read while doing that,
yeah, exactly.
That could hurt though.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to see you both and see you both being healthy. Good luck. Good luck. The future is mysterious, but I'm feeling optimistic.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis. Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you too, Dennis. Thanks very much. Thanks,
Stay
Rick.
safe.